Deadly Premonition is such a strange game. It's a survival horror game that isn't really that scary, the frame rate is occasionally awful, the graphics don't look good even for 2010 standards, it doesn't really feel good to play, the weapons pack no punch, driving controls like a nightmare I had once, the map makes me want to die, managing hunger and sleep in a game that forces you to wait hours in order to do certain story events is such a pain, and yet, I kinda love this game. It's so unabashedly weird and surreal that when I play it, despite not really enjoying my time playing it, I can feel the passion of the developers shine through in such a unique way that very few games have offered to me before. It's a game that almost feels like when they set out to make it, they lined up a bunch of strange mechanics on a table, looked at every single one of them, and no matter how useless the actual mechanic may be in terms of gameplay, decided to put every single thing on that table in the game. Directed by Hidetaka Soehiro, otherwise known as Swery, the game started development in 2004 and was originally announced under the name Rainy Woods at the Tokyo Game Show in 2007 and was intended to release the following year. This version, however, was cancelled shortly after because of technological difficulties before the project was rebooted in 2008 as what we got as Deadly Premonition. Looking back at this original trailer for Rainy Woods is so weird. It features a lot of similarities to the final product, but also some very distinct differences. Emily and Thomas, two officers working at the Greenvale police station, are identical to their Finnish counterparts as far as I can tell, but the Sheriff George Woodman went through quite a change in design, and the main character, FBI agent Francis York Morgan, not only looks completely different, but also goes by the name David Young Henning. Also, the twins that are featured throughout the game aren't twin children in this trailer, but instead two old men in a red room, drawing even closer parallels to the TV show Twin Peaks than there are in the final game, and trust me, there's quite a few of those already. After facing many trials and tribulations with the game during development, it finally released in February 2010 to reception? Opinions on this game were all over the place when it dropped. While most review outlets tended to hover around the 7 out of 10 mark, some scored it as low as 2 out of 10, and others as high as 10 out of 10. These reviews didn't seem to help sales either. Despite being released at the budget price of only $20 when it came out, the game sold extremely poorly, only passing about 50,000 units sold 3 months after launch, but has since gained quite a cult following, allowing the game to live on in the hearts of fans for 10 years. But what exactly do people see in this game, or don't see in some cases? What has caused this game to continue to stay relevant in the face of mixed reviews and low sales numbers? Today I want to take a closer look and examine the idiosyncrasies of this game and see why it appealed so much to me and so many other people. It all begins with the discovery of the murder of 18-year-old Anna Graham in the small town of Greenvale, Washington, and the arrival of FBI agent Francis York Morgan. We open on York speeding down the road to Greenvale on a dark, rainy night. As the downpour continues outside, York reviews some case files that led him here and muses about his previous investigation, seemingly to nobody except for someone named Zach. York is all alone in the car, and it appears Zach might be some sort of imaginary friend for York. Taking a break to light a cigarette, York briefly looks away from the road, and when he looks back up, a figure in a crimson raincoat has appeared in front of his car. Quickly jerking the wheel, York is sent careening off the cliff and into the forest below. Miraculously, even after somehow narrowly avoiding colliding into a tree on the way down at Mach speed, York is still alive. But, with his car completely destroyed, he'll have to make his way to Greenvale on foot from here. As he begins to trek through the forest, strange things start to occur. Some paths are blocked by what looks to be red ivy, and shortly after, York is attacked by strange zombie-like creatures who shamble towards him in jerky, unnatural movements. Luckily, York is equipped with his trusty standard-issue handgun and manages to fight his way through the monsters. Near the end of the forest, York is attacked by the same red raincoat-clad individual he saw on the road. Narrowly avoiding this attack, he finally escapes the forest and is only a short distance away from Greenvale now. The creatures are gone, and everything seems to be back to normal. As York reaches the outskirts of the city, he runs into the head police officers of Greenvale, Deputy Sheriff Emily Wyatt and Head Sheriff George Woodman. George obviously seems uncomfortable with the idea of an outside agent coming in to investigate a murder in their town, fearing it might undermine his authority, but York won't hear any of it and looks to find himself a place to stay. After a good night's sleep and a very particular cup of coffee, York heads to the police station to begin his investigation. Your job as York is to get to the bottom of the murders, both in Greenvale and potentially the similar cases outside that led him to this town, find the truth of the Raincoat Killer, and uncover the secrets of this small town. From here, the game is mainly split into two different segments. The open world, in which you can spend your time driving around Greenvale, taking on side quests, playing minigames, and talking to the locals, and the otherworld segment shown off at the start of the game in the forest, where you investigate places of interest, fighting and sneaking your way past ghoulish creatures to discover evidence that gives you a clear picture into the scenes of the crimes. When I think of a survival horror game with an open world, the first thing my brain goes to is something like The Evil Within 2, or even Silent Hill Downpour to an extent, but this couldn't be a less apt comparison. The only dangers you'll really encounter in the open world are really mundane, such as running out of gas or passing out from hunger after going too long without eating. There's no combat while you're in the open world, and it's solely focused on the side content like its various minigames such as darts, fishing, racing, and so on. Along with those are the side quests you can accept from the citizens of Greenvale. The open world runs on a 24-hour clock, with all the inhabitants of the town keeping to their own schedule during the day. In a lot of ways, Deadly Premonition's open world is a lot closer to something like Shenmue than other open world survival horror games. Swery has stated before that he wanted the game to be focused on real time, real scale, and real life, meaning that in order to make this town feel as alive as possible, he wanted the entire game to run on a schedule that the characters would follow in order to feel more like people going about their day, and that the town was scaled to be as closely as possible to a real American town to add to that realism. I'm gonna be completely honest, engaging with the open world is not very fun in this game. Talking to the people of Greenvale can be very entertaining thanks to all of their quirky and unique personalities, and some of the side quests can be good for some extra development and some useful items, but most of the minigames are very lacking and are usually a waste of time. Fishing is pretty much just a roulette wheel where you have a chance to get some free items, and racing is just driving through various checkpoints for a few minutes, and your reward at the end is something boring like a collectible trading card. And maybe it would be more enjoyable if the cars controlled well, but they don't. In fact, it's some of the worst driving controls I've ever personally felt in a video game. Sometimes it feels like the slightest little nudge of the thumbstick is enough to completely off-road the car, leading to a lot of crashes. And whenever you crash the car into something, it takes damage. If that little percentage down near the speedometer reaches 0, your car breaks down and you're stuck walking. Same with if you run out of gas, so you have to remember to fill up during your trips. However, if your car does happen to run out of gas or break down, you do have the option to have a new car brought to you with the flare item, so always make sure to keep a few on hand just in case. You do a lot of driving in this game, but if you do a certain side quest, you can also acquire a radio that allows you to fast travel to locations that you've already been. Unfortunately, if you don't know about this side quest and don't complete it before the end of Chapter 2, you can be locked out of it for the rest of the game. Honestly though, even without the fast travel and the awful driving controls, driving almost never feels boring at least. Occasionally while on the road you'll get a talk prompt. Hitting the button will see York start a conversation with Zach. About what? Well, movies, punk rock, lots of stuff. Hearing York go on and on about movies and bands he loves and how he manages to connect them together is so much fun, and honestly makes driving around worth the time. Every single time I see that prompt appear, you better believe I'm getting ready to hear York chat about Superman 4. The other half of the game takes place in the Otherworld. In these sections, you make your way through broken, distorted versions of locations you can explore in the open world, very similarly to the Silent Hill series. In the Otherworld, it's up to you to figure out how to deal with the attacks of the nightmarish creatures and collect clues in order to create profiles of the crime scenes so York can move forward in his investigation. When first profiling, the images you see are nothing but static, but as you collect more and more clues, York is able to fill in more and more pictures until finally the profiling is completed and you're allowed to see the full events of what occurred in that location. In order to find these clues though, you have to venture through the corridors of the Otherworld and deal with the evil that lies within. Luckily, enemies are easily dispatched in this game. In addition to any melee weapons you may find lying about, you are also equipped with an FBI standard issue infinite ammo handgun, so unlike Resident Evil and other similar resource management heavy games, you'll never really have to worry about running out of ammunition. As you play more of the game, you'll also gain access to other weapons like a submachine gun, a shotgun, and more. Ammo in these guns are limited, but are easily replenished in restrooms that are located in the Otherworld that allow you to shop and purchase weapons and ammo, sleep to fill up your sleep meter, save your game, change your suit, shave, basically anything you can do in a hotel room. So, with the open world stuff lacking, the gunplay must be the star of the game, right? Well, not really. Imagine the aiming from Resident Evil 4, but bad. That's Deadly Premonition. The game controls on foot like your average third-person shooter with the ability to control the movement and camera separately, but when you aim to fire your weapon, the game locks you in place much like Resident Evil 4 and 5. But, unlike those games, moving your reticle can feel very sluggish. Deadly Premonition also has a lock-on feature, so once you have the reticle on the enemy, you hold the button and your aim will snap onto them, allowing you to kill them much easier. But unfortunately, the guns don't feel as satisfying as you would think. They've got the power, but not the punch. The shotgun in particular being a real disappointment for me. When you fire a shotgun in Resident Evil 4, you clear entire crowds with a satisfying blast, but in Deadly Premonition, the shotgun just feels like a slightly more powerful and shorter reaching handgun. Despite the gunplay not feeling great, it never gets frustrating though, mainly because this game is really easy. In the recordings for my playthrough, I only died a total of 6 times, and every single time was because of a QuickTime event I missed. Enemies are very slow and predictable, making it very easy to either shoot them down or even just run past them. The only thing you really get for killing enemies is extra money and occasionally items, so if you don't need to grind for extra cash, nothing is stopping you from just sprinting past most of the creatures towards the goal. You can also hold your breath to hide your presence, but the enemies are so slow it's barely worth doing, and it's better just to run past them. Occasionally during the Otherworld segments, you'll also be hunted down by the Raincoat Killer, which pretty much amounts to glorified QTEs. In these parts, you'll either have to run away from the killer by wiggling the stick or mashing the keys on your keyboard while occasionally hitting a button to avoid an attack, or you'll be placed in a room where you have to find a hiding spot from the killer and keep your presence undetected as he searches for you. All you have to do in these parts is just not do anything except hold your breath whenever the prompt appears on screen. After a short while, the killer will leave the room, allowing you to return to your investigation. Alternating between the open world and the otherworld pretty much makes up the entirety of the game, with some minor exploration sections thrown in for good measure. And with the description I gave, it might be easy to think I don't like playing this game, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Even though I don't think most of this game feels good to play, something about it is just so charming that it keeps all of the gameplay entertaining. York congratulates himself when he gets headshots.
Amazing. Nice shot.
And in spite of the very rough graphics, the atmosphere is actually fantastic and manages to set the tone well depending on the section of the game you're in. This game also just has so much ambition and passion behind it that I can't help but love it. People actually sleep under the blankets in this game. Sure, the blankets are as thick as a brick, but they work! And they move with York as he tosses and turns. Most games today still don't do this. Deadly Premonition also features real-time beard growth 5 whole years before it was touted as a feature in The Witcher 3. If you go a while without shaving, York will actually grow a beard that stays on him for the whole game if you want. If you go too long without changing your clothes, you'll actually become smelly and become surrounded by bugs that don't go away until you change. You have a hunger and sleep meter that decrease in real time that you have to keep filled. If your hunger meter runs out, you will starve to death, and if your sleep meter decreases too much, it'll affect your aim. These seemingly meaningless additions just show me that underneath the jank lies a game that people really put quite a bit of work into. Sure, not every mechanic lands, but they're there, and it's cool that they're there. When it comes to games, I'd much rather take a game that's really interesting but maybe has some unpolished mechanics than a game that's been done to death but polished to a mirror sheen. The characters in this game are also just so damn endearing that it's impossible for me to hate them. Every single NPC in the game has some kind of unique trait that makes them memorable even if they aren't relevant to the main story, and York is so much fun to watch. He's such an oddball with his conversations with Zack and seemingly random tangents he'll follow at a whim that observing what he decides to do next on his journey is half the fun of the game. Even when frustrated with parts of the game like this chess puzzle, where I spent a long time trying to decipher exactly what the game wanted me to do, checking the order of the posters on the wall, trying to incorporate the actual rules of chess into the puzzle, the solution ends up being to literally just put the pieces in the order York says, barely qualifying this as a puzzle. It's more funny than annoying. Sometimes the story will go through extreme tone changes at the drop of a hat, where the game will go from dark and heavy to goofy as hell in an instant. I can't help but laugh when these situations arise. I spent nearly this entire game with a dumb grin on my face, and genuinely loved experiencing this cult classic. The story for this game is absolutely wild and really has to be seen to be believed. I've heard some people refer to this game as the Room of video games, but honestly, I don't think that's true. I think The Room is something that's entertaining because it tries so hard to be a real movie, but was just so incompetently made that it ends up being entertaining because it's funny, rather than the compelling drama it was likely supposed to be. While Deadly Premonition, sure, it definitely has a lot of funny moments that were likely unintentional, mostly because of the gameplay, genuinely succeeds at what it set out to do. The plot is actually really good, and managed to do a good job at keeping me both invested and surprised. The flipping back and forth between its grisly dark moments and upbeat moments at the drop of a hat add a sort of unpredictability to the game, that when you go from the happy town of Greenvale suddenly to a location that's dark and filled with monsters, it's actually kinda chilling. Especially as the creatures talk to you and say they don't want to die, as you riddle their bodies with bullets. A very obvious comparison, Twin Peaks is very similar in the way it juxtaposes its campy and dark elements, and a lot of the same effect of Twin Peaks comes across in Deadly Premonition. It all adds to the surreal vibe of the game, and while I am occasionally laughing while I'm playing the game, it feels more like I'm laughing with the game than at it. These characters are obviously very strange, and I think the game knows that. Even the jankiness of the gameplay almost becomes an integral part of the experience, and once you embrace it, the game becomes an unforgettable experience that takes you through a bizarre murder mystery adventure filled with fun characters and freakish moments. I implore you that if you are a fan of interesting stories, Twin Peaks, or survival horror, you should definitely check this game out. Fortunately, nowadays this game is pretty easy to come by. You can pick up the original 2010 release on the Xbox 360 and play it on Xbox One through backwards compatibility, although obtaining a copy can be a bit pricey, same with the PS3 release. But the game was also released on PC in 2013 and again recently on the Nintendo Switch in 2019. The Switch version is portable and is easily purchasable on the eShop, while the PC version of the game requires some patching to get to work properly, but still plays fine from my experience, and regularly hits under $5 during sales. Also available on PC is the game's phenomenally cheesy soundtrack, varying from a cappella to punk rock, with the game's iconic whistle theme, Life is Beautiful, as a particular standout. With such a loving cult fan base, it's good to see that such an eccentric game was kept alive for so long, but it appears that it will stay as just that, a memory in the hearts of fans. Or so everyone thought. But in one of the most shocking announcements I've ever seen in my life, in September 2019, it was announced that Deadly Premonition 2 would be coming to the Nintendo Switch, directed by Swery once again. The game is currently set to come out in July of this year, with the same voice actor of York reprising his role in his first acting role since the original game. Deadly Premonition now stands as a testament to how far a game can go off of word of mouth and how continued fan interaction can make a game become so much more than just a disposable piece of media. How these stories can stick with people for years after and become a part of who we are. I can't wait to see what the future holds for both Deadly Premonition and Swery, and I'm so glad that many people managed to look past this game's rough exterior to see something truly special underneath.